So you're now currently in a workshop. So this is a hands-on, basically a session. So that will involve having a live exercise. So you can follow along and just listen for the content. But obviously, the big benefit of having exercise and live application is to do it yourself. For this workshop, actually, it's pretty easy. You should be able, with just a browser, do, I think, all the exercise. Some exercise will be a bit easier if you have, for example, burp or zap. So the first thing you're going to need to do if you want to follow along is first get to this URL. So template-injection.gosec.co. So this will be the material. So instead of slides, it's a format. It's a tool called Code Labs by Google, and they basically give you templates to produce this type of tutorial. So you'll have the agenda on the left, so all the modules that we'll do today, and in the middle you'll see the content for each of the exercises. So one exercise, for example, will look like this. We have the theory, and then you have the link to the exercise.
Philippe, can you put the URL in the chat so it will be easier for people?
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Makes sense. So you can just click on the chat. There will be a link. I will start with some theory, so don't worry if you're not yet ready. But yeah, so I'll keep the link there. After this workshop is completed, all the 6 applications that will be running will continue for at least the rest of the day. After that, there will be a link published on GoSecure Twitter to basically the archive of those slides. So they will no longer be hosted at this URL, but you'll still be able to run them yourself locally. So I'll be publishing all the Docker recipe and the code for all the 6 applications. So this way you'll be able to play on your own and experiment with those exercises. So now that the format is explained, I'll start. So this workshop is about template injection. It's not a new vector of attack, but this is one that have evolved greatly in the past few years. So the main talk I would say that introduced the subject was in 2015. James Kittle did a great survey of all the template engine, and basically realized many web applications were exposing a template to their user, meaning you might have a marketing application that is having templates for emails, and instead of having just static email, application give you the option to have some placeholder for maybe first name, last name, some information that is dynamic depending on the user. So in the end user, so it's not a developer, somebody that is using a web application will edit templates. So yeah, so James Kittle was the first one, and the idea, most of those exercises I built them 3 or 4 years ago, but this year there was a really interesting talk at Black Hat, and I wanted to update basically those exercises and give it some new vector. So the agenda for today, first we'll have some introduction to what is template injection, what are template engine. This will be not an exercise, just a small introduction. Then I'll go through how can we differentiate template engine from each others, because when you're testing an application, maybe in an assessment, unless you have developed the application, you don't know ahead what is the template syntax and what is the library being used in the background for this application.
Can you zoom your screen?
Sorry?
Can you zoom your screen? People say it's very small.
Okay,
and
Okay.
it's actually very small. But people
Okay.
can follow
I'll zoom
using
this
the
way.
URL. You can follow using following the URL if you want at the same time. So there's no problem.
Yeah.
But still zoom it, please.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you for notifying about this problem. So if you have any issue, I'll be monitoring the chat when we do the exercise or during the presentation. So don't hesitate. As I already mentioned, burp and zap are optional, but you'll be a bit more efficient for at least 2 exercises. So what is template injection? So I already peeked at what it was, but basically it's template initially were mainly used for developing Vue for web applications. So in an MVC application, you have the V for Vue, which is the way you're going to display information. So instead of having code tightly coupled with your data, where you're doing some print of your data, you have a template that is describing. Okay, just give me a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so as I said, so in MVC application, the view will be a template that is decoupled from the controller and what is generating the data. Sorry. Okay, one moment. Give me just a second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. There should be no longer any interruption. So now that we know what are templates, why they are interesting for security is that they are basically some form of script. So some might be pretty basic, but many of them that are implemented in application are have tons of feature to make the life easier for developers. So when we are talking about templates, they might look like this. So the developer will write this type of code, or the end user, and the idea is you have a static part and you have data that will be bind with this type of character. So depending on the template, the syntax will differ. Okay, and the reason why I'm doing multiple exercise with different technology is to give you some idea of how people can turn some interesting feature into basically a powerful feature that will give you a remote code execution. And by giving you a concrete example, this will allow you potentially to exploit a template that doesn't have maybe a payload that is known. And yeah. So now we know what are templates and what is template injection. So let's say we find an application that is exposing some form of templates. How do we know what technology is being used? You might say we can just test all of them, but there are tons of template engine. So for example, just in PHP, I've listed at least 8 here, and some language might have less if some are really popular. But for our language, you'll have multiple ones. And the way we can find out which template engine is being used is by simply using some specific syntax. So for example, this is a decision tree that was built by James Kittle in its original presentation. And if we do this operation, so not every template engine will recognize the $sign followed by square bracket. So for example, FreeMarker will support it, Mako will, but not Twig, because Twig is too, it's a syntax like this. So by having some simple payload this way, we can create a decision tree that will give us some precise information about what technology is being used. Once we know the technology being used, then we can test some payload based on research that was done previously. For the workshop today, we're not gonna do the guessing game because usually it's something that it's better once you have played with a couple of injection already, and then it's easier to do some assumption. We're already at the first exercise, so I will give information about PHP Twig. I'll show you the demo application, and then you'll have some time to do at least 15 minutes to do the exercise. And if you have questions, don't hesitate in the chat. Sorry. So Twig, the first one is one for the PHP language. So you might know other template engine, but in PHP, many of them are tightly coupled to their CMS. So these are less likely to be exposed to basically an administrative feature to edit email or basically any templates. So the syntax in Twig, it's going to be 2 brackets to open data binding, and we'll have a pipe to add additional filter. And yeah, so this is really just a basic to map scalar value, so just a string value. Now, the interesting part about Twig that was exploited to leverage remote code execution is we can register a new filter. So instead of using pre-built filters in Twig, we can register a new one to a PHP function and then use this filter. Actually, what was found by James Kittle is that we can register a filter that when there are none. So here we register for an undefined filter for the callback exec. So this means that by default, if it's not a known filter, it will call this function. So it's a 2-step process. So first, there's this filter being registered, and then it's being triggered with one parameter, which is the command that we want to execute. So this one is pretty straightforward. And you'll have an application to play with it. This means, first for the exercise, I encourage you to first do some minimal testing. So for example, just do an arithmetic. So most template engine will support maybe a small addition or a multiplication. And once you see that the value is transformed, then you can go to a payload like this. Because in real life, if you're doing some assessment to test an application, and you're sending right away payload like this directly, there's many factors that can make this payload fail. Maybe the command you're using to create a reverse shell or something to create a file. Maybe there's a fact that, for example, the folder you're expecting to write doesn't exist, or some specific environment. So to avoid this, first do a small test, confirm that first there's a template being executed, and then you can go for this type of payload. So I'm going to give you at least 10 minutes. So the application, when you open it, it should look like this. So it's a simple form that has an entry for email. But here you're going to see that if we enter an email, it's going to be displayed here. But it's not just string concatenation. What I'm selecting is actually a template, and the developer did a mistake. They've include user input in the template string. So on port 8012, you can find the first application, and the URL is there in the lab one. So I'll take a small pause here. If you have any question regarding the first exercise or the introduction, let me know. And question can be on other topic than what we've presented, anything related to template injection. So good luck. I'll paste the link for the current exercise.
Philippe,
and I'll go get some water.
Philippe,
yeah,
change
there's
your,
a question. Yeah,
change your chat to everybody, because you're now just sending it to our organizer.
Okay, can you just repeat? I didn't hear clearly.
You send it just to me and other organizer, not to everybody. You have to put your chat to everybody.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
I don't know if your interface is in French or English, but at the end of the chat, there's at or a. Everybody is the first one. Now you're like in the organizer and.
I send chat to organizer only, organizer and panelist only, and then the list of panelists.
You have to put it at 2, everybody.
Okay.
I write it, but I did copy it, but so.
Okay. Okay, I'll look into it.
Do you see the question section? There's a little bit over chat. There's a place called question. Do you see question coming in?
No. There's audience view, sharing,
audio, webcam, question, chat.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so I need to share that to you. So, okay, let me put the question for you. In the chat, just answer in the chat.
Okay, so the question is, the presentation will it available after the workshop? So yes, the code labs will be published on GitHub.io, so it will be a static website along with the different exercises. The main difference is that I'll publish the receipt, so Docker compose configuration and the code for the application, but you'll need to deploy them locally or on your own server. This is the only difference. So I'll do a demo in, I would say, 5 minutes. So at 11:30, 12:30, I'll do a demo.
Ah, attends, je pense que là, tu peux voir les questions.
Yes, now I can see question. Yeah.
Okay. I think I need to put them to you each time. At least now I know.
And I'm pretty sure I cannot send to the chat. I cannot send globally to the chat.
Hmm?
Like
You
I
you
can
don't
do a
see,
screenshot, but I'm
yeah.
pretty sure.
So you don't have everybody as a.
No, not in my chat. I can put the chat in full screen. I don't see any other option.
Casper.
There's an audience question, which is, hello, I don't have any audio, neither on the PC nor the phone. Is it the
That's
same for, is it a earlier question?
I think it's our earlier question.
Okay, because okay, perfect. I was connected for at least an hour, so.
Yeah, people don't close GoToMeeting completely when they switch between.
Okay, Philippe, I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, no problem. Personal. Philippe, are you back? Do you see now the question, all the question and in the chat to send to everybody? You should see them.
Yeah, it's collapsed, but I see them. Okay.
So.
Try to. Okay, I found it. Thanks. To Question from Lily, will you demonstrate how to get the flag? Yes, so I'm gonna do a demo very soon, and you'll get some time afterward to complete if you don't have the time yet.
Okay, we're gonna now Philippe have all access to the questions, so he will be able to answer your question when you write them in question. So either he will answer by talking or writing, depend of the question. But if you want, you can access also in the ACFest festival. We did a new channel called Injection Workshop, so you can write there. So yeah, Injection Workshop. The name is in the chat if you're not sure.
Okay.
We don't see your screen anymore. It's normal.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Just
you
I
only
need
see
to
your
grab a
face.
file.
Okay, just to be sure. So don't hesitate to ask question. Yeah. So I will recall there's an injection workshop in the ACFEX Discord, so you can ask your question there or just ask him here. There's no problem.
Okay. So I'll do a demo. So first exercise, I'll do demo, and then in maybe 2 minutes afterward, I'll continue to the next exercise, but you'll get some time to finish it without problem. So there was a small twist with this exercise. Some of you probably have hit one important obstacle, but we'll see the solution. So first thing to do is
yeah, zoom a little bit.
Okay.
You're very small.
So the first step is finding the injection point. So finding where there is a potentially a template being executed. So here, if I submit this, it's not working. But if I submit this, we can see that there's a result, and it's not execute client side. This is really executed server side. So if we look at the response, we should be able to see the 49 result. One thing I recommend when I did my test, I submit with a subtraction when you're sending it over a repeater or the request emitter in a ZAP. The reason I do this is sometimes if you do a plus, this will be decoded by the application. Sometimes, specifically in this context, for example, in a post parameter, plus will be decoded as a space. So for this reason, using an arithmetic, just a negation operation will do a subtract operation will do the job, and you'll be more confident that this is there's no decoding being done. So first thing, we confirm that there is code being executed. So 1338 minus 1 is giving us lead. So now we have an ingestion point. So maybe with some guessing that the fact that it's PHP, then we can start to do some tests with Twig payload. So we're going to use the payload that we just saw. So we registered on undefined filter, and then we're going to trigger this filter. The thing you're going to see is that if you execute command, you're going to get only the first line. So this is a big limitation. So for example, I'm listing files at the root of the file system, and I'm only getting the first one. So with this filter, Twig is only keeping the first line. So unfortunately, this will be quite difficult to maybe get a file that has content on multiple lines. One thing you could do to solve this is do a reverse shell. So connect to a port that you control. But for this workshop, I have an easier solution. You can simply do the command echo -e, and with some backtick, specify your command. So with this, the -e of echo will remove basically all new lines. So if your objective is just to view the content without exporting it with the proper byte, this will work. So for example, if I execute this instead, I will not just get var, but I'll get bin, root, dev, and all line of so actually it's keeping only the last line from
Peux-tu agrandir un peu zoom a little? It's very small. People have difficulty to see because you're on top plus your stuff, there's all the stuff, it's take a lot of place, so it's very small.
Okay, I think I'll...
And we do have a question. Will you present some examples that are good for AngularJS or React.js? Because I don't see any labs on that. So
the answer for this is unfortunately no. Today we're only seeing. Is it bigger?
Yeah, it's getting better.
Okay. So I've increased a bit my resolution. So to the question, are we going to see Angular or React.js injection? So these are client-side injection. This is a bit different. The main objective with client-side template injection is basically to trigger XSS most of the time. Unless maybe with the React backend, you might be able to do some something that is remote. So yeah, the quick answer is no. So we're only going to see in PHP Twig, Jinja 2 in Python, and Tornado, then two other libraries in Java. So I don't want to spend too much time on the first exercise. Now that you have the steps, I'm also going to paste the quick solution for basically circumvent the fact that only the last line was being kept. So if we look at this, you're going to see that there's a folder secret. So then I'll just go straight to the folder, and then we can see there's a file called flag, but with underscore twig, just to make sure nobody guessed the file name, and then we get the content of the file. So I'm gonna paste the small trick with the command echo. So this was not in the thing is, I don't think I can send to all attendee. Philippe, can you paste this payload to everyone?
Should be able to do it.
But can you see my screen? Can you see my go to webinar?
Yeah, we see your screen, but it's still a little bit small.
Actually, I can see it now. It just appeared. Okay.
Yeah, it's under.
Okay. So for those doing the, I'm gonna add. This is the trick for exercise. Okay. For the next exercise, it's gonna be pretty straightforward. Like the known payload will be the solution almost directly. So, oops. Okay, I have opened something. Okay, now next one. Okay. Should be a bit bigger now. Now that we've seen PHP, we're going to jump to a Python library. So this one is really interesting because you need to the payload is using some specific internals from the Python language, and this is the type of thing that you might see in other type of attacks. Sometime you'll see some framework being exploited, and the different payload can are using some specific property that can be used in other type of attacks. So this is interesting knowledge for not just template injection. So Jinja 2 is a template that is really similar to the template engine from the Django, but it can be used endlessly. So the developer can have the bad idea of exposing it to a user without any type of sandboxing. And the syntax will be really similar to the Twig library that we just saw. So if we have a string that is bind to this template, and again, we consider that the end user, a user that is remote, not the developer, can give a template to the application. So if we do this type of syntax in the template, this will use the message variable that is bind to this template and will display it. If we want to access a property from a variable, then we can use dot. Just like in most programming language, you'll be able to then access in a telescopic way multiple properties that are nested. As an alternative, you can also access property with kind of a dictionary format. So here we're accessing the bar attribute from Zoom from the foo variable. Now, what interesting feature are present in Jinja 2 for exploitation is that meta property from Python are exposed and are accessible in the templates. So because they want to make the life easier for developers, they make sure that the developer will be able to call any field and method from variable that are bind to the templates. So to access the class method property, we can access it on any variable, but also if we declare an empty string, this will become a variable, and then we can access the method class. The reason we're going to use in payloads empty string is that when we can have a universal payload, we're going to focus on making a payload that will work 100% of the time, so you don't have to tweak, okay, what variable are available in my templates, and then edit the payload. So that's why our payload will use empty string. Okay. Now, in the class meta property, we'll also find a big dictionary of all object reference. So this is called MRO for method resolution order, and you'll find all the type associated to this class. So for example, the string is one example. You'll find first the current type of the object, but also is parent class up to the type object. And type object will be present in all object will inherit from object, as it's the base class. The interesting part is we're going to be able to move up to access the type object, and from the type object we're going to be able to see all the subclass from object. So in the end, we're going to see all type load in the current runtime from Python. And what does it mean in Python? In Python, not all classes are loaded initially. So as you do imports, types are loaded into your application runtime, and from there you can access them and use them. So will it look? So with this syntax, we're going to take what does it do? So first we have empty string. This will be an object string. We look at its class describing this particular object. So we'll have string, base string object. So we're selecting the third element, so index 2. This will be the type object, and we're going to select then we're going to call the method a subclass to get all the subclasses that are currently loaded for type object. So now this is the type of output you'll get, but I've reduced the output because in practice you'll get a list of at least 200 types, even with some minimalist application. So now that we can access any type, we're going to hunt for those types based on their name. We're going to hunt, for example, the type file. So what is interesting with type file, so this will be the 41 element. So we're going to use index 40. This means that this expression is the type file. And from this type, we can call the constructor directly. And here, we're going to call, for example, we're going to select the file etc password with the second argument from the constructor is read. And once we'll get an instance of file, we can call the method read. So this will be analog to doing this syntax in Python. But we're doing it because Jinja 2 doesn't have the file constructor already mapped. Then we're using this big chain to access the file object. So this is specific to Python 2.7, but this was to give you a simple example. One thing you'll need to do is build in exercise and in real life. If you want to be sure that your payload works, often it will be index 40 because of the way Python is loading its object. Usually it's not deterministic. It's not something documented, but in general, it will be across any server, any application. It will be index 40 for Python to that 7. But if you want to be sure, you can first evaluate this expression, so list all the subclass, then identify which index is the API you want to call. So in this case, when I see type file, I use this index, and then I'm sure I'm selecting the right thing, because otherwise you might get error like the constructor doesn't have a second argument because you're calling something that is not callable this way. Okay, now we're gonna jump to some already straight to what we really want. So we're going to want to do command execution to have a remote code execution. So in Python 3.8, the same payload will be usable, but with a different index. So all the examples are Python 2, but you'll see the alternative. So it's going to be the same syntax because Jinja library was not implemented totally differently from version to version. It's in Python 2, it will be and 3 will be the same syntax. The difference is that because your runtime type will be mapped at different index, you need to be aware of this. So as I said, in 99% of the chance that in Python 2, this will be the index, but this is not something that Python is committing to. It's just something because of the way it was implemented, most instances will fall on this index. Now that we have a reference to subprocess popen, we're going to call this the constructor of process open, and we're going to give it some arguments. So we're going to specify first our command. Shell is to basically load some thing in the path, so you don't have to specify, I think, absolute command with absolute path. stdout is not useful because we don't have access yet to the console of this application. And we call communicate. Communicate will open basically the exec v. Basically, we'll do a syscall to execute the command, and then with as a return value, we'll get the output of this command. So this is the payload that you should be using for this exercise. I'm giving a small alternative for Python 2.7 because this is a payload that is often usable for sandbox type of I would say sandbox escape challenges in CTF. So sometimes you'll be able to have some limited access to Python, but you won't be able to access, let's say, the OS class or the OS module, I should say. So with this expression, we can start from the warning instance. And a warning instance has a cache of a different module. And even though the OS module, for example, was not imported, you'll be able to access it because it's a built-in Python module. There are some references in this cache. So init is an internal property from warning instance. We're going to look at this property, then this dictionary, and this is needed to access all the value from a dictionary. And if we look at the different index, at some point will fall in the OS module. So this is a reference to this module. And with this, now instead of having access to a class, we have access to a module. And what we can do is call system. So this will be equivalent to call os.system. And then you can pipe the result anywhere you want. So the thing with OS system is that the output is not returned as a string, as a, so system doesn't return a string. One quick trick that I'm doing is outputting the content to a temp directory. So if you have write access to, it can be any directory, you can write to it, and then with a second expression, we're going to use the trick that we've used to access the file instance, and then we read what we have written. This is a quick trick. I've included because it's something that is not necessarily used in template injectors most of the time, because there are some payload that will work on our Python version, but this is one that could be useful to do some sandbox escape thing. Now, to test your skill for this one, you'll be able to use the popen payload on this application. So I'm opening it. Let's see. I'll copy paste just to be sure. Maybe too much people are using it. Okay, so I'll have to double check. Just give me a moment. Oof. Okay, I'm gonna restart it just to be sure. Is it the right exercise? Yes. What? Okay, so this Python application doesn't seem to scale that well. Quick question: do people are able to access this application as I do? It might be pretty slow. Maybe somebody is running a scanner or something, but you should be able to just do one request and get what you need. So for this exercise, I've included 4 fields. So this is a test. So you need to find which field is actually will be part of a template. So actually most of them except one will not be in a template, but most of them will be included in a template. Okay, and currently I think it's too slow, or okay, I'm just gonna test if the other applications are still running. Okay, unfortunately. Okay, so what I recommend you, by the way, this application is a form. When you submit it, it will return a V card. It's a format that will basically include contact information, so it's a specific format. And because your web browser doesn't render those type of file, you'll get a file download. So for this reason, I really recommend you to use a proxy. And if I can show you, but I guess I'll have to pass to the next exercise. So what you'll get, let's see. Let's do a quick test. Okay, I need a different parameter. Okay, we're gonna skip this exercise, but first you find the parameter that is part of the template injection, and then you'll be able to use the process open payload. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of requests being made to this server, And I think maybe people are doing a lot of requests to get the index maybe of the right object, but I'll have to pass to the exercise. So, okay, finally load, but okay, I was not on my proxy. So, okay, I'll skip this exercise because it might be too slow for everybody to test it at the same time. But what I'll do, when we're going to do the next exercise, I'm going to publish GitHub repo with all the code. So in case you want to do it right now, you'll be able to run it locally. So sorry about that. So I'm going to pass to the next exercise. We still have 4 to go. So Tornado, this is another template engine for Python. But with this one, it's much easier. So just to give you a comparison that even from the same language, payload will not be the same for different libraries. So syntax looks almost identical, but the big difference with Jinja 2 is that in Tornado template, so Tornado template is a template built into the Tornado framework, so it's a web framework. You can do imports from your template, so you don't need to do the OOP to access the OS module from the warning cache that was including a cache of all module load. You can just do imports, and even though the OS module is not used from this application, then you can load the module and it will be accessible. So this one is even easier. You just do in the same payload the imports, and you can call process open much more easily. As you'll see, the OS module or imported module any can be accessible from tag template. So for this exercise, it will be on port 8014, and yeah, this one has only 2 fields, and it's simulating somebody registering to a mailing list. So when you submit the 2 field, you'll receive you'll see a page that is looking like an email-ish. But the idea is just I didn't want to have SMTP to manage. So you'll get, for example, this, and you'll see that one field is reflected, so it might be this one, but I encourage you to test both. And for example, if I do this, we can see that the first argument is indeed contained to the template. So there's a potential for execution. Is it Tornado template? Most likely, because this is this exercise. But when you see this after submitting 7 multiplied by 7, most likely this is a server-side thing. One thing you need to verify is always verify that in the source code the result is 49. Because, for example, if you have AngularJS will evaluate bracket from this syntax. So you might not have remote code execution, but by the way, you might have XSS potential, because you can convert server-side template to XSS potentially if Angular is low in the page. So I'll give you some time for this next exercise. This one is much simpler for Tornado, so it should be pretty quick. You just copy once you find the right. So I can actually do the demo right away. So I'm going to execute the ls command, and now I can see that I'm listing all files from the root, file and folder. Then again, we can see that there is still a secret folder, and then there's flag torn. You can see here. So But obviously, if you're already set up and more familiar with reverse shell, you can do it like this. We're executing a command just that I'm using some simpler payload for this workshop just to get quick proof of concept. If you're reporting the bug to maybe developers, sometimes just having a command like id or UMI will be a good enough proof of concept to demonstrate that you have access to the remote server. So I'll be on mute and I'll be deploying, I'll be not deploying, but publishing the code for the previous exercise in case people want to do it live now. But I don't think it will be working soon unless somebody was actively scanning the host and stuff. But both exercises are kind of similar. It's just that the payload is much simpler for the second one. So in, I would say 5 minutes, because it's really a simple test, but take your time to play with it. In 5 minutes, I'm going to pass to the next exercise, which will be velocity. So Java template. Yeah, so stay tuned and see you in 4 to 5 minutes.
Someone told me the other exercise is not working. So if you want to try, you can go and try now.
Yeah, and by the way, if you already complete some exercise, don't hesitate to continue to the next one if you want to look. I think we'll be fit on 2 hours to do all 6 exercises, but you can skip. Everything is ready and deployed. Okay, so I'll continue to the next one. I'm still, by the way, creating the repository to give you access to source code, to Docker and everything. But all the application you have access to, it will be the same thing. So velocity, this is a library in Java. So the two main ones that are currently very popular, while there are some new ones, but velocity and FreeMarker are probably the most popular one. They are easy to configure. They have been there for the past 10 years, I think. And yeah, so velocity is kind of the more lightweight one. That might be one of the reasons they are integrating this specific library. I'm going to zoom. Basic syntax, I didn't include it directly here, but you'll see that it's similar to what we saw here. It's going to be $sign followed by a variable. It's going to be FreeMarker will also use $sign, but with square bracket around it. When James Kittle first published his paper, he was mentioning that for velocity, sorry, he could use an extension called class tool. So both velocity and FreeMarker have extension. So by default, they want to keep the library as lightweight as possible, but they have some additional extension. And one of them is class tool that can allow you to load different type of resource, but it's not there by default. So this payload was what was documented for gaining remote code execution with velocity, but it's very unlikely that class 2 is being loaded. I think that in strut2, if you would have some the velocity plugin, or there was one specific framework that when you import velocity, this property class was present, and it was class 2 extension. But for this workshop, we're using vanilla velocity, and we're going to use reflection that is kind of similar of what we saw with Jinja 2. So we're going to access meta properties to access class that are not directly a reference in our template. So our template, we might be able to edit the content, but usually the application will give us some data to bind. And the data that is being mined is not necessarily utility class and very powerful things. So we need to start from what we have, different references, and from there access an interesting class. So here I'm going to explain the payload that we'll be using. So first we initialize a variable. So as I mentioned, we could use theoretically any variable that is bind to the template, but to keep it generic and to make sure that this payload will work no matter how the variable are named, we can use this. First, we're going to look at every object in Java as a class property that will basically be a class. So class with a C, capital C. So this property will be equivalent to call get classes that will return a class object. Then the class object, we can load additional class to load. So this is a static method that is not specific to the instance of string. And from this, we can load additional types. So for this payload, we're loading runtime, character, and string. And these reference are classes definition. And from those, for example, the runtime classes, we're going to be able to, from this reference, to call static method. So here we're calling the runtime method. Get runtime will return a class runtime, and runtime in Java is basically a class that allow you to execute command. There's also process builder, but because with this syntax we can access mainly static method easily, it's easier with the runtime classes. And then the last two lines are basically just loops that will display one character at a time from the input stream, which will be the result from the command being executed. So now that you've got all what you got all what you need, it's going to be the same principle. You have an application. First, confirm where the template is, and there is a template evaluation, and then execute this payload. So one thing you can do, aside from using arithmetic operation, you can do, for example, just an assignment, or maybe you can concatenate two strings and see if they displayed in a concatenated way. So if there's a concatenation, then you know that it's not displaying your operation as is. So the application, so I'm going to open it just to show you. So okay, and also in the tutorial information on Code Labs, you'll find an important information. This one requires a user and a password. So this was just to simulate an application that had some. So password is 12356. So the only thing I wanted to simulate is to give you some example of type of context that you could see an actual template injection. So usually it's not something with this type of interface that you'll see that yes, user have access, but maybe some operator or a user that can edit maybe a translation string will have access to templates. So here you'll be able to edit templates, and you can, okay, I'm going to zoom again. So once you log into the application, every time you do save or test, the way I've done it is everything in store for your session. So if you're updating a template, don't worry about affecting other people. If you're doing save and you go back to the template, you'll see it's being saved, but it's only for your session. You can also just do test to see the template being evaluated. So here where this application is having some template for email that are in HTML, you'll see that by default there are two variables. So that's a great hint that this is not just a static string. And once you do save or edit, save or test, I mean, with test, you'll see that some information are being replaced. So here, John and Smith, and there's a URL being placed here. You can see also the same version in here in HTML that is rendered. One of the things that James Kittle mentioned initially in his presentation is that often people will find template injection like, hey, I can edit from this user HTML description, then I have access. But if you find if you have access to a file or maybe HTML file that you can upload to a service that are rendered after that, always test for template injection, because you might have much more than just an XSS. So this is for the this quick how to use this application. So remember admin 123456 to log in, and you'll be able to edit the template. Same objective. Once you have a valid execution of command, try to access the flag.txt on the service. So in 10 minutes, I'm gonna show the solution, or maybe a bit less. Okay, and in 5 minutes, I'm gonna show the solution, and you'll have a few minutes just before I pass to the next exercise after that. So I'll be looking at the question. So see you soon. Okay, I'm gonna answer a question that was asked. David asked, how can we prevent this type of attack? So the main thing to keep in mind, I'm giving few examples with different template engine, is at the moment there are no template engine that have a golden record of being 100% safe, or at least have it good protection. So far, most of template engine have recently implemented a type of sandbox, but we're going to talk in a moment when we switch to free marker, which is the next exercise, is that people have find bypass to those. So I don't think that there are yet that many template engine that are ready to be exposed publicly to user that could be malicious. So that's just something to keep in mind. So first thing, how can you manage the risk if you have an application that is exposing templates? Verify that the user that are accessing these templates are verified, and it's not everybody that can register an account or can see this feature. So that's one way to limit this. And the other thing is enable some sort of sandbox. So the talk that that I'm gonna ping to is a talk that was looking at different CMS, and see that when they use a template engine, people found some interesting way to escape the sandbox. So sandbox exists. That's one way to fix it if you absolutely need to have those templates exposed. But at the moment, it's not 100% bulletproof. So try to avoid it. That would be the first thing, because it's not super common and it's not something that you absolutely need. And one thing you could do is maybe a less sexy way is, instead of using maybe a velocity or free marker, switch to simple string replacement. So for example, if you're doing email templates, you could do some really simple substitution, and maybe you'll cover the feature that you need. And then if you need some more rich templates, then maybe consider a template if it's sandbox enough. So I hope it's answering the question.
Philippe, there's a good question by Jonathan for once, so can you answer it?
Yes, okay, I just said the question. So for velocity, the variable that will always work is simply assigning. You can create a variable on the fly. So that's what the payload is using, the last one. So with the set directive, we can create a variable with empty string. So this way, when we copy our payload, we're sure that the X variable will be existing. And this way we can do the telescopic dot class dot for name.
Philip, it's normal. We don't see your screen now.
Yes, I'm just preparing for the last demo, for the demo for velocity. Okay. Okay, at this point, I think everybody should have completed the velocity, and probably most of you are currently reading the free marker one. So the way the exploitation work, once you copy the payload, I'm just gonna zoom. So in case you didn't get it, so I've just copy paste the payload that was in the code labs templates, and I've replaced this section. So instead of the ID command or UMI, you replace it with ls, and then you'll find that there's a flag.txt in the secret folder. So same principle as the previous exercise, you'll be able to see the content being shown here. So it's always easier to look at the view on the left. In practice, always use a repeater and burp or anything equivalent. So this way you can see the source, and for example, if there are some specific XML tag, you can see the actual result. Okay, I'm gonna switch to the next exercise. Zoom again to make sure that okay, and we're on. Perfect. Sorry about the resolution that is not optimal, but at least everybody can read now. So free marker, very similar to velocity. Syntax would look like this. We can bind some string or scalar directly. Free marker has a lot of limitation. We cannot do assignment as easily. We cannot call any method at any time on any object. There is very specific mechanism that will see our template model, but from this, people have leveraged remote code execution, and we will see how. So every variable that is exposed on to the template. So these are, for example, if I'm writing a template for email template, there might be a message variable. This will be the way I access it. Same thing for user. I can access the property display name this way. Now, as I said, you cannot call directly a method on an object, but there are some built-in functions that can be added as a suffix. So it's looking like a bit Twig template from PHP, but instead of filters, they call this built-in function. So these are all the built-in functions, and there is one interesting one which allows us to instantiate a class. But we cannot do this in simple data binding like this. We need to do, it can be used only in the context of assignment. So it's going to make more sense once you see the first payload. But also, so most of the built-ins are really primitive and will be useless for command execution. So for example, ABS will give you the absolute value of any float value. So most of them are really a simple one. But the interesting one is the new, and we can see even in the official documentation, they are mentioning that there are security implications with this built-in. This allows us to instantiate any template model classes. And it might sound really limited, but by default, FreeMarker has a template model that is execute. It's an utility class to allow a template to execute command. So just to give you maybe a hint about why they are building this into the templates, is that sometimes templates are used for documentation, and people might need to, in their documentation, have some output from commands to show example of output. So if you're generating dynamically documentation, it can be useful this way. So this is the payload that was basically proposed by James Kittle, and this worked perfectly in 2016 before they've started to implement some sandbox. So the way it works is, as I said, the new built-in only work in the context of assignment. So you won't be able to do this question mark new on regular data binding with the bracket character like this. But here we're assigning to the X variable an instance of the execute class. And this is working only because the execute class is a template model class from FreeMarker. So in this first exercise, this will be an on-sandbox version of the application. And in the last exercise, we're going to see the same application, but with a sandbox mechanism implemented that is very similar to the live-free CMS. So I've took the sandbox from live-free that I have enabled, because by default, FreeMarker doesn't have a sandbox. So the first application that we're going to see is vanilla FreeMarker. I think it's the latest version. Yeah, it's the latest version. So the only thing you need to remember, this application is password protected. The password is accessed as described in the Code Labs tutorial, and the application will look very similar to the previous one from Velocity. It's just the visual will change a bit, and obviously the main change, it's no longer Velocity being used, but you'll have a similar interface. And again, don't hesitate to edit the page. When you are editing it, these are saved only to session attribute. So basically, you have your own snapshot of this mini CMS. So you can execute the payload that you want, and you won't be overriding a payload from other people. So try the vanilla payload first, and once you get command execution, again, just make sure everything is working, and you can access the flag.txt on the server. And in 2 minutes, I'm gonna show again the demo, and then we're gonna go to the last part, which is the new content. I would say a very good example of what was present at Black Hat this year regarding templates injection. So see you in 2 minutes. Okay, I'm looking quickly at the question. Yeah, sorry about the chaotic at the beginning for the cat being loud. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm leaving you working. I think all questions were answered. Okay, so I'm gonna do the quick demo. Probably most of you have done it. We were at the easy CMS, so probably the easiest payload you will get in this workshop. So again, the workshop is an opportunity to play with the environment. So don't hesitate, obviously, to continue to play with the syntax free marker or any other template to gain some interesting knowledge and maybe find some alternative to the payload I've present. So the final payload would look like this. So all you had to do was replace the command here. So pretty straightforward. Yeah, so and the way it looked, command was being displayed here as a result here, just like the velocity exercise. So now it's going to get a bit more complex. So we're going to look at sandbox escape, more specifically, sandbox escape in CMS that would be using a free marker. So we're just going to do a step more than the previous exercise. So the previous exercise have no protection, but a free marker, since at least 1 year, they have a template class resolver, and this class will implement what can be accessed. But the thing that you need to be aware of is that free marker, this is what is referenced directly in the template. But if let's say you access a class that eventually this class access another class, template class resolver will not see transitive dependencies. So that's one important thing. Yeah, so the first thing you need to do if there is some sandboxing, so obviously the first thing that they will block is being able to load the execute classes that was implementing template model. So the built-in class from FreeMarker, it can easily be blacklisted with an implementation of this resolver class. But the different sandbox escape that were found by Alvaro Munoz and his colleague are leveraging instances that were made available to the templates. So they have evaluated a couple of CMS. So I'm going to zoom out to show you the paper quickly. So yeah, this is what I want to show you. So FreeMarker was I choose it because there's a bit more CMS using it, but I would say that the more common one are Liferay and XWiki, at least that I've saw. So what did I want to say? Yeah, so this simulation is basically initially I wanted to deploy a Liferay instance, but I realized it needed quite a lot of resource for what I could do a specific exercise when I can do just a specific exercise that is just rendering a template that does the same thing. So the class resolver that I'm using is actually a copy paste or identical implementation of the Liferay one. So you'll get the same behavior. So the idea is that because it's a CMS, people will be able to upload file. It's a wiki kind of page, but pages often, at least there's a concept of template in Liferay that is template file that will have access to different dynamic source, and then you can render them with FreeMarker tags. What we're going to leverage is the specific instance that this CMS is exposing. So all the 5 CMS that I've shown, the small color box that were using FreeMarker, will not necessarily add to the data model the same variable. And because there are no known sandbox escape with vanilla built-ins of FreeMarker, we really need to look at those specific instance and variables that are exposed and see if they have interesting feature in them. So one thing we can do is enumerate the data model variable, which is a global variable that is available in the most recent FreeMarker one. Older version will use this syntax, but in recent version, you need to do a list tag to enumerate those keys. So every key that will be print, it's a variable. So for example, when we were printing a username in an email template, this would be a key. What we're looking for in those variable is any class that could leak a reference to the class loader. So it would be too easy if an utility class is being added to the model and straight we can do get class loader. But if we can get indirectly a reference to the class object will have a get class loader method that will give us a working class loader that would allow us, for example, to load classes from external source. Same principle can apply if we can get a reference to the thread classes, protected domain, servlet context. So servlet context, this is probably going to be the most commonly exploited because I think in more than 80% of the CMS, the templating feature were exposing a request variable that was basically HTTP servlet request classes, which has a field that is servlet context. So I think you're going to start to see where we're going with this, but other generic classes that are not necessarily proprietary API, bundle wiring from OSGI. So OSGI is a way to handle large application with a lot of dependency of different versions, but bundle wiring would allow us to load potentially custom classes. Spring framework is pretty common, so being able to access application context. Application context, we're not going to exploit it in today's exercise, but often, or at least in the presentation, they mentioned that we can find sometimes reference in session attribute. So if the template or the CMS give us a reference to session attribute, we might be able to find a session attribute that include a Spring reference, the Spring framework, and from this we can maybe grab an application context reference. So for today, we're going to look at so this is just an example. So again, this is not a good syntax to mention because we cannot access class loader directly through those tags, but with assign, we'll be able to access it. So one example, if we can find, for example, in this request variable, let's say it's an instance of servlet request, then from this we can call get servlet context, and from this we can get a class loader. So this is just an example of chain to show you how can we get to those classes. So not all classes are implemented the same way. This is really important. So in the paper, I'm going to show you again the paper because I want to give you some pointers. So if you have to exploit this type of thing and test it, you'll know where to look. In the papers that was released by, I think it's a collaboration with Fortify and GitHub called Room for Escape, you'll find in the FreeMarker section different alternative for depending on the container. So because all class loader will behave differently, here's an example. So Tomcat will use a class loader that is custom to Tomcat that is called web app class loader. And these are the interesting methods from this class loader that can give us some interesting operations. For example, being able to write to disk by specifying a path and an input stream. But then if the application is also on Jetty, if we manage to get a reference of the class loader, we will get a different operation. So here they have some hints about what could be done with Jetty. In most cases, they are not giving full payload. I don't know if it's because it's in the planning of being patched or having some API being refactored to avoid those type of abuse. But in the end, just to show you that they have documented various ways. And the payload that I'm going to show you, I didn't invent it or create it. There's actually a universal payload for, but it's not working in the latest version of the FreeMarker. So if it was updated sometime this year, it might not be vulnerable, but this payload that we're going to use is agnostic of class loader. So this payload, okay, so the first one will be purely reading files. So here there are some missing steps. So first we need to grab a class loader reference. So first we need to do an assign to the class loader variable, and then we'll be able to follow it by this payload. So this is kind of different compared to the previous exercise where we were able to whatever the variable in place, use our payload and get remote code execution. Here we need to grab to find a class loader reference. So, and also something I noticed, this is taken from the same paper again, from the Black Hat presentation. They mentioned that they are able to exfiltrate bytes from any file using this, but when I tested myself, bytes couldn't be displayed. And looking at the documentation and the error that I got, FreeMarker only displays scalar in primitive type, and arrays of primitive type are not supported. So even if you have a byte array, this will not work. After some trial and error, the only way I managed to make this payload work is by accessing each byte one after another. So you can do this in a loop, but yeah, this directly didn't work in the past two versions. So the most recent version were not working. This was not working. But this is pretty limited. This is only to read file. But it's a great way to start if you are seeing that there's a template being executed, but you want to go progressively until you get a more advanced payload. So now we're going to look directly at the universal method. So how do we grab a class loader? So similar to the previous payload, from this until the end, we need to have found a class loader reference, and this class loader need to be referenced by a variable very indirectly from a variable that was in the data model. So this object needs to be replaced with whatever you found in this template. So for this exercise, you're going to need to use the first loop that enumerate basically a variable that are exposed to the template. And I've done just like in Liferay. Liferay by default, you get a request, a reference to the variable request, which is the servlet HTTP request. So in practice, they are putting those reference so that people can have access to potentially session information that could be put by some plugins. So if you want to display some information from Liferay plugin, I guess, or information from session. This could be a way to have more dynamic templates. But in practice, having access to HTTP servlet requests is very hazardous, as you'll see. So this, you'll need to replace it with the variable name that you found, and then with this payload, you'll be able to execute command. So any arbitrary command, so you only need to replace these. All the rest, in the end, what it's doing, this payload is still using the execute classes, but instead of using the assign with the new, we're using load classes method from a class holder. So instead of doing apostrophe new, that would trigger the class resolver, and there could be some filtering. Now we're because we have a reference to a class holder, we can directly call this method and then execute method. So long explanation for basically you need to find a reference to a class holder. So you might need to find a telescopic chain of properties. So it's not directly the a class holder property on the first object, might be a long chain. But once you get your class holder, in most cases, this payload should work. So this is the final exercise. So it's the same application as the previous one. The only difference is that there's a sandbox component that was configured. So there's an implementation of class resolver that is identical to the implementation of Liferay.
You have 2 minutes, Phil.
Perfect. So we're done. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter, or I'll be on Discord. So I don't have Discord open right now, but in 5 minutes, I will be logged to the Access Discord. And that's it. I'll be also publishing on my Twitter account link to those code labs. They will be hosted also free available. The only thing is that this domain will change. It's not. It's going to be hosted on GitHub instead. And again, the application will be. You'll be able to run it by yourself, but this specific hosting that is only run for Access will be probably shut down by the end of the weekend. So you can still continue to work on it, but yeah, it's for a limited time. I've included in conclusion some reference. So, and at high level, I've already answered this. Forgot his name. Okay, David mentioned, was asking, what are the good practice to mitigate this type of vulnerability? I think first you need to remember that template engines are very powerful and they are risky. Meaning you might accept the risk of integrating a template engine to your application and allowing your user to edit template to have some powerful feature. But keep in mind, this template engine might evolve over time, so new feature will be added, so the risk might increase. And at the moment, most sandbox are pretty new, and a few sandbox escape were found so far. So it's not something to hold on it and be sure 100% that it's going to be safe. So maybe do some additional sandboxing, maybe with containers will be a more efficient and more efficient way, especially if it's a critical environment. So yeah, and again, reference server-side template injection. The first one, this is a presentation by James Kittle, and this is the presentation from this year. And I've included some interesting article that I took inspiration from for creating those exercises. So,
thank you very much.
So I'm done, but you can continue working on the exercise. Again, Code Labs is a video tutorial format, so you can continue on your own time and at your own rhythm. So enjoy the rest of the conference.